as a Christian, I strongly believe in the power of the tithe. I've experienced it in my life. I have seen my life transform financially because of trusting God, and that's really all that's about, the tithe. But the unfortunate reality is that the church has twisted the tithe into essentially their ability to pay their salaries and build their buildings and get smoke machines and guitars and that sort of thing, which is completely the opposite of what God told Malachi in Malachi 3:10 about bring your tithes and offerings into my storehouse. And test me in this. It's the one time God says, test me in this, that I will open up the windows in heaven and pour out such a blessing that you can't even hold it on. So there is food in my house. It's so there is food. It's so that anybody who is in need has the ability to go to a church and receive what they need to some degree. Jesus Christ, when he taught, when he stood here on the earth and he taught, everything he taught about was the mission of a Christian is to raise disciples, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, take care of the widows and orphans, visit the prisoners and the sick. Not that complicated. Now, there's a number that really bothers me about American churches. It's estimated that somewhere between $165 billion and $400 billion annually are being pumped into churches and Christian charities every year, every single year. Where is that money? Well, where it's going is, on average, with churches, 60 to 90% of their income goes to salary. So let's just start there. Most of it goes to salary. Now, there's a problem with this. You know, I understand there's small country churches that barely make anything and they got to pay the pastor something. That's not what I'm getting at. But even with that, what is your church doing? Like, when I tithe to anything, it has to be doing something other than putting on the Sunday show. If all they do is put on the Sunday show, well, they don't get my money. Period. Like, it's a waste of my money. I would rather take that money and go buy tickets to go see the Kansas City Chiefs or something. Like, it's a waste of money. Their show is not that good. And that's not what that money is set aside for. What that money is set aside for is to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, take care of those orphans, visit the prisoners sick, raise disciples. And I often stop at the raise disciples part, because the problem with the modern church is many of them will go, aha, we raise disciples. Do you? Or do you just sit in a coffee shop once a week and go through a workbook? Because the way that Jesus raised disciples was he went out and worked with them. They went out and did Christian work. They did the work of the Christian faith. They did the work itself. They were performing miracles. They were healing people. They were feeding people. They were clothing the naked. They were taking care of the widows and orphans. They were visiting the prisoners and the sick. They were doing all these things. So if the church isn't doing any of those things, it's a waste of your money. It's a waste of your money. Raising disciples, sure, does it help to go through a workbook? Sure. Do you learn something? Yes. Does it make you a disciple? No, it does not. Because in the end, if all you learned was a couple facts about the Bible and you're still living the same way as far as working goes, you're not a disciple. And I also want to pause there for a second and remind people, I said this in many videos, so I apologize if this is the first one you're watching. I am not preaching salvation through works at all. What I am preaching is if your relationship with Jesus Christ is real, then the Spirit will dwell within. And if the Spirit dwells within, it's just going to be tapping your shoulder to be doing these things. You're just going to naturally start to desire to do the things that God desires to do. You're going to naturally start to hate the things God hates and love the things God loves. And when you see a church not doing these things, to me, I hate that thing. Like, I literally, it builds this sense of wickedness, like a righteous anger grows in me of the wickedness I see of these people consuming the sacrifice of the altar, because that's really what it is. It's kind of like back in the day, if I would have brought a bull to the temple to sacrifice it, and then I turned it over to the priest and he just cut it up and started selling steaks and eating it and stuff instead of consuming it on the altar. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. You're giving the money, you're laying your money at the altar of God, and these priests and preachers and pastors, or whatever you want to call them, they're taking it and they're paying bills and they're paying salaries and they're planning new children's wings, and they're, it's not a business like a corporation, and you got to stop doing that. Like, you need to lean on the Lord. You need to lean on God. And the reality is if as a church you're not taking care of the least of these, then God's not going to reward you. You know, you may have this sense of reward because you have, like, a lot of churches have kind of a, what do you call it, like a geographical blessing, where they happen to be in an area where there's just a bunch of self-proclaimed Christians who just live for themselves, and they'll fill your house up, man. They'll fill your house up. But it's a geographic blessing, so to say, but you're not receiving blessings from the Lord. You're paying your salary, you're building bigger buildings, you're making fancier shows, you're putting on the smoke machines, you're doing these things with the money that people are laying at the sacrifice of the altar. It's terrible. You know, there was a moment in the Bible where a priest of the temple, his sons were doing that. They were consuming the sacrifice of the altar. They were taking the animals and they were profiting from them. And God told this priest to stop it through a prophet, and then he didn't stop it. And he told him he was going to turn him inside out if he didn't. And he didn't. And he turned him inside out through his anus. Like, think about that for a second. Like, this is what God does to people who consume the sacrifice of the altar. It is not okay. It is not okay. It's something that is very wicked. And I just think it's important that we open our eyes to, well, where's your money going? Because if you're going to take good hard-earned money and you're going to lay it at the altar, is it just going in that guy's pocket? If it's going in the guy's pocket, don't put it there. You know, I understand pastors got to get paid. I understand. But if it's 60 to 90% going to salaries, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Something is wrong. It's just not biblical at all. And it's something we have to open our eyes to. You know, as for me, you know, I give my money to the prison ministry, the local prison ministry, because they are raising disciples the right way. They're always out working those men that are coming out of prison and those women that are coming out of prison. They're always going back into the prisons. You know, this is money you should invest, stuff like that. Places that are really feeding people. You know, I belonged to a church long ago, it was a mega church before my eyes were opened. And they had like a day a week where you can go and go through like a little, you know, get groceries and stuff, got kind of week's worth of groceries. And I thought, well, that's great. You know, this church is bringing in $10 million a year. They should be doing stuff like this. And I realized that's its only charity. Well, isn't that enough? Well, no, because it's actually not their charity. What it was Harvesters, a local charity that feeds hungry people, was leasing space from the church to use that space so they can give out food. So literally the church is like, look at us giving out food. When really all they were doing was accepting money from the people who were really giving out the food so they would have a space to give out food. It was just another money-making scheme is all it was. It's really kind of pathetic. And you have to open your eyes, investigate. Like, before you write that check or whatever you do and you submit money to a church, where's it going? Where's it going? Find that out. And if it's not raising disciples by working disciples, if it's not feeding the hungry, if it's not clothing the naked, taking care of the widows of orphans, if it's not visiting the prisoners and the sick, you're wasting your money. Like God said, bring your tithes into my house so there is food in my house. And test me in this. It's the one time in the Bible where God says, test me in this, that I won't open up the windows of heaven and pour out such a blessing that you can't even hold it all. Don't give that money that we're talking about. Don't give that to just some guy who's putting on a show. Don't. Like, it's a waste of your money.